The ravens were flying, the winds in the north whispering warnings no one could hear, except Ned Stark. The war was over. Robert Baratheon lay dying, poisoned and bloated, babbling regrets and drunken final wishes. The Iron Throne sat empty, for a heartbeat in time, and Ned, Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, stood at a crossroads that would not only decide the fate of his house, but the entire 7 kingdoms. He had held on to the secret for 17 long years. Lyanna's son, not a bastard, not his. Jon, no, Aegon Targaryen, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Ned had promised Lyanna. He had lied to every man, woman, and child he loved for the sake of that promise. But now, the lies were poisoning everything. Cersei had already crowned her vile child, Joffrey. The Lannisters were moving quickly, pulling strings in every corner of the court. Ned had tried honor. He had tried letters and oaths. But in this den of snakes, truth without power was just a whisper lost in the wind. So he made a choice, one that would haunt him forever. He gathered his bannermen in secret. Trusted few, men like Sir Barristan Selmy, Sir Davos Seaworth, and Maester Luwin, men who still remembered loyalty, men who still believed in right. He told them the truth, the real truth, not the lie about Jon Snow, but about Aegon Targaryen, the son of Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark, born in the Tower of Joy, hidden away from the wrath of Robert's rebellion. There was silence after he finished. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to stop crackling. Ser Davos was the first to speak, quiet and unsure. If this is true, then the boy is not your bastard. He is the heir to the 7 kingdoms. He is, Ned said. And the realm is about to fall into the hands of vipers. I cannot allow it. Then what do you plan to do? Asked Ser Barristan. The small council won't believe you. The queen has the throne by her son. She'll scream treason. I plan to take the throne from them, Ned said, in the name of the rightful king. It was madness, what he was suggesting. Ned Stark, the man of honor, the quiet wolf of Winterfell, was about to commit treason in the eyes of many. For the truth. He didn't want power. He didn't want crowns or songs. He only wanted Jon to be safe. And for once, safety didn't lie in shadows. It lay in fire and blood. They moved fast, faster than the Lannisters expected. While Cersei plotted, Ned seized the Red Keep with loyal Northern and Riverland forces. He had men still in the capital, gold cloaks who remembered Jon Arryn. Ravens flew, and by the time Cersei realized what was happening, the doors to the throne room had already been barred. And there, in front of lords and soldiers, Ned Stark walked through the great doors of the Iron Throne with a boy at his side, dark-haired, solemn, and confused. Tell them who you are, Ned said quietly. Jon looked at him, unsure. I don't... Tell them, Ned said again. It's time they knew. Jon turned, his voice uncertain. My name is Jon Snow, but that's not the name I was born with. And then Ned stepped forward, drawing the sword of House Stark, holding it high. This is Aegon Targaryen, he announced, his voice booming across the throne room. Son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, the blood of dragon and wolf, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Gasps, murmurs, outrage, a few swords drawn, but it was already done. And as Jon stood before the Iron Throne, unsure whether to step forward or run away, Ned bent the knee. The North bows to its king, he said, loud and clear. Will the rest of Westeros follow, or burn? The throne room reeked of smoke and tension. The Iron Throne loomed behind Jon like a beast with jagged teeth, and every lord present looked between Ned Stark and the boy he had just named king as if trying to decide whether to kneel or kill. Cersei wasn't there yet. the gold cloaks, now loyal to Ned through bribes and quiet threats, had locked her away in her chambers under heavy guard. But the Lannisters wouldn't sit idle. Jaime was still in the city. Tywin was gathering armies. Blood would come. That was certain. Ned just didn't know whose. Jon stood frozen, not moving toward the throne or away. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "This is a mistake." "No," Ned said firmly. "It's the only thing that's right." "But I'm not a king. I don't want a crown. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're Aegon Targaryen," said Ser Barristan, stepping forward. His old voice was filled with something close to awe. "Your father was my prince. If what Lord Stark says is true, and the look in his eyes tells me it is, then your claim is stronger than any child Cersei could spit out." Jon looked around the hall. Some knights nodded, others looked disgusted. But one thing was clear. The lines were being drawn. Fast. "I didn't ask for this," Jon muttered. "None of us do," Ned said. "But duty doesn't ask for your permission. It just arrives." By nightfall, the city was divided. Some banners flew wolf and dragon, others still swore to the Lannisters. The Red Keep was in chaos. Maesters wrote scrolls so fast their fingers bled, trying to send word to every corner of Westeros. Sansa and Arya had just arrived in the capital the day before Robert's death. Ned hadn't even had a chance to see them. Now, they were under guard, as every family in King's Landing scrambled to figure out whether the Starks had saved the realm or betrayed it. Catelyn had been summoned from Riverrun, Robb from Winterfell, and Jon, he sat alone in the King's, Solar staring at his hands as if they were covered in blood. "I'm not my father," he whispered. Ned stood beside him. "That's good. Rhaegar, for all his greatness, let the realm burn in his silence. He believed prophecy would save the world, but he forgot that people suffer while kings chase legends." "You lied to me," Jon said, pain creeping into his voice. "My whole life. You let me think I was your bastard. You let me be hated, treated like a mistake." "I let you live," Ned replied quietly. "Because if Robert knew who you really were, you would have been butchered in your cradle." Jon turned to him, anger finally surfacing. "And now? You put me in front of 1,000 swords and told them I'm king. You didn't save me. You just made me a target." "I know," Ned said, "and I'm sorry. But I also made you something more. I gave you a choice. A real one." The next morning, the nobles were summoned. Jon entered the throne room again. This time not as a boy caught in a storm, but as something close to a man. He did not wear a crown. He did not sit the throne. He stood in front of it, flanked by Stark men and a few uncertain Reach and Stormland bannermen. "I never asked for this," he said. "I never wanted a throne. I never wanted war. But I won't let lies rule this kingdom anymore. I won't let children die because men fear truth." He looked around the room, at the gathered lords, at the knights, the schemers, the snakes. "My name is Aegon Targaryen. I am the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. I am your king, only if you choose me." There was silence, and then one man stepped forward. Ser Davos. He knelt. "Your Grace." Then Ser Barristan, then Maester Luwin, then others, one by one, slowly, reluctantly. But the tide began. Only one figure remained standing in the back. Ser Jaime Lannister, golden and still. "This is treason," he said softly, hand on his sword. "You're making a war you don't understand." Jon met his eyes. "Then draw your sword, Kingslayer, and let's find out who understands war better." The sword never left its scabbard. Jaime Lannister stared at Jon for a long breath, his green eyes unreadable, his golden hand twitching near his hilt. The tension in the throne room felt like a rope pulled tight enough to snap. But Jaime didn't draw. Instead, he turned and walked away, saying nothing, his cloak brushing the marble floor like a final warning. The storm was coming. Later that night, Ned stood over a war table, eyes scanning a crude map of Westeros marked with tokens and pins. Jon was with him, silent but watching. Ser Davos was drinking from a cup of wine he didn't seem to taste. Ser Barristan paced like a caged animal. "The Lannisters will not accept this," Ser Barristan said. "Jaime is already gathering what loyalists he has. Tywin will march from Casterly Rock the moment word reaches him." "They'll claim Jon's birth is a lie," Davos added. "Call him a bastard or a pretender. They'll say you've gone mad with grief over Robert's death and seized power for your own." Ned nodded. "Let them speak. Their words can't change blood." "Blood won't be enough," Barristan growled. "We need armies. You have the North, some Riverlands houses, but we'll need more. The Vale, the Stormlands, Dorne." Jon finally spoke. "They won't fight for me." "Then we give them a reason to," Ned said. But reason alone wouldn't win a realm. Power would, and power meant war. The first blow fell faster than anyone expected. 2 days later, the tower of the Hand exploded in a ball of green flame, wildfire. The blast took out half of the west wing of the Red Keep. The night sky lit up like the gods themselves had cracked open the heavens. Screams echoed through the city. Dozens died. The message was clear. Cersei had struck back. Ned found her the next morning, dragged from her chamber by his men. Her face was bloody, her lips split, but she wore a smile like a dagger. "You think you've won," she hissed. "This boy you crown will be dead within the year. My father will see to it. He'll burn the North to ashes if that's what it takes." "You tried to kill a child," Ned said coldly. "You murdered innocents." "Innocents don't sit on the Iron Throne," she spat. "Monsters do, liars do, and now you've made your own monster, Stark." She was thrown in the black cells that night. Jaime disappeared. The city trembled. Jon sat in the gardens, away from the firelight, the chaos, the politics. Arya found him there. She hadn't said much since arriving. Too much had changed. He wasn't her brother anymore, not by name, but she didn't care. "You still feel like Jon to me?" she said, sitting beside him. "I don't feel like anyone," Jon whispered. "I thought I was a Stark. Now I'm a Targaryen. I thought I was a bastard. Now I'm supposed to be a king. I don't know where I belong." Arya shrugged. "Maybe you don't belong anywhere. Maybe you're supposed to make your own place." Jon looked at her. She was young, but something in her eyes was sharp, too sharp for her age, like she'd seen the world already and didn't trust what she'd found. "You think I'll be a good king?" he asked. She grinned. "You're better than Joffrey. That's a start." He laughed, tired but grateful. That night he finally stood before the Iron Throne and laid his hand upon it. It was cold, sharp, heavy with ghosts. He did not sit. Not yet. He just looked at it, this cursed seat that had driven men mad and carved kingdoms into graves. "And," he whispered to himself, "if I must wear a crown, let it be heavy. Let it hurt, so I never forget what it costs." But beyond the walls of King's Landing, war was already marching. Ravens flew to Riverrun, to Casterly Rock, to Highgarden, to Sunspear, and in the frozen north, something older than any crown was stirring. Something that would not care who ruled the Iron Throne when the dead came knocking. War came not with a trumpet, but with silence. It began on the King's Road, where Tywin Lannister's host burned villages bearing the direwolf banners. No declarations, no demands. Just fire and steel. His message was clear. No bastard, no matter the blood in his veins, would sit the Iron Throne while the lion still roared. In the throne room, Jon listened as the reports arrived, each one worse than the last. Refugees pouring into the capital, loyalist houses falling under siege. And the Westerland's host, 20,000 strong, marching faster than any expected. "They'll be here within a fortnight," said Davos, his voice grim. "Less if they take the Rose Road." "We can't fight Tywin alone," Ned muttered. "Even with the Riverlands, we don't have the numbers." Jon stood by the window, staring out at the city, his city now. But it didn't feel like his. It felt like it was slipping through his fingers before he'd ever held it. "We need the Vale," he said. "Lord Arryn is still young, but his bannermen will follow if we give them reason." "And what reason would that be?" asked Sir Barristan. "Most lords still think you're a northern lie wrapped in a Targaryen ghost story." Jon turned, jaw clenched. "Then we give them proof." And so they did. A feast was held in the Red Keep, small in numbers but rich in meaning. The ancient crown of Aegon the Conqueror was brought out, 3 dragon heads wrought in dark steel, rimmed with rubies. Jon stood before the assembled lords, flanked by Maester Luwin and Sir Barristan. The old knight spoke first. "I served Prince Rhaegar. I knew his love for Lyanna Stark, and I believe what Lord Eddard has said. This boy is no Snow. He is Aegon Targaryen, born of fire and ice." Then Maester Luwin stepped forward with the sealed parchments Ned had kept hidden all these years, letters from Ashara Dane, from Howland Reed, even a half-burned page from a Septon who had witnessed the secret wedding of Lyanna and Rhaegar. The room held its breath. Some were convinced. Others still whispered, "Pretender," behind their wine cups. But one man stood, Lord Jon Royce of the Vale. "If the blood is true, then the boy is king," he said, "and the Vale will not kneel to Lannister dogs while a dragon wolf sits the throne." With that, the Vale was in. But it came with a price. War moved closer. The siege of Riverrun had begun. Catelyn Stark, who had ridden to her father's side, was now trapped in her childhood home, with Tywin's forces pressing in. Robb Stark had called the northern banners and was marching south, but the Riverlords would not last that long. Jon made a decision that stunned even Ned. "I'll ride to Riverrun myself." Ned stared at him. "You're the king. You don't ride into danger." "I'm not a king if I sit in a castle while my family burns," Jon snapped. "If I don't fight for my own, why would anyone fight for me?" He left at dawn. A host of 2,000 rode with him, fast, lean, and quiet. They would not break Tywin's siege, but they didn't intend to. They planned to slip through it. They wore no banners. No songs followed them. Only cold steel and quiet breath. 3 days out, they encountered scouts, Lannister outriders. Jon led the charge himself. The first man he killed was barely older, then Bran. The second begged for mercy. Jon gave it. Ned had taught him that. Mercy isn't weakness until it gets you killed. They reached Riverrun by nightfall. Smoke clung to the air. The Tully banners hung tattered on the walls. The river ran dark, thick with ash. Jon's host slipped in through forgotten fishing paths, guided by old maps and whispers from local farmers. By dawn, they were inside the keep. Catelyn wept when she saw Jon. "You have your mother's eyes," she said, and it was the first time she ever looked at him without bitterness. That night, they planned, not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival. Because Tywin Lannister was less than a day away, and he wasn't coming to negotiate. He was coming to crush a boy king's rebellion under golden boots. The horns sounded just after dawn, low and steady, echoing through the mists that clung to the Red Fork River. Jon stood atop Riverrun's battlements, eyes fixed on the golden banners gliding into view beyond the tree line. The Lion of House, Lannister waved in the wind like a promise of death. 20,000 men. At their center, Tywin Lannister sat tall in crimson and gold plate, his face carved from stone, his eyes empty of mercy. He did not rage, did not bellow orders. He didn't need to. The cold efficiency of his army spoke for him, organized, silent, ruthless. Jon felt the weight of it in his chest. This wasn't some border skirmish. This was annihilation in waiting. Inside the keep, the mood was darker than the river. Catelyn moved through the halls like a ghost, commanding where she could, comforting where she couldn't. Sir Brynden Blackfish sharpened his blade beside the gate. The archers lined the walls. Everyone knew what was coming, and still, Jon refused to. "Run! They'll destroy this place," Sir Barristan warned him again. He'd arrived the night before with 200 reinforcements from King's Landing, against Ned's pleas. "You are worth more alive than this castle is standing." Jon looked at him. "You told me Rhaegar was loved, that he was a warrior and a prince. But he died running from Robert. He died with songs written about him, but the realm still burned." "I won't run," he said. Then came the letter, a white raven, carried by hand. It was short, handwritten in sharp, precise strokes. "Surrender the boy. Denounce the claim. The North returns to its snow. The realm remains whole. Or burn." Tywin Lannister Jon read it twice. Then he burned it. "No reply," he said, and so it began. Tywin did not waste time. The siege snapped shut like a noose. Catapults wheeled into place. Siege towers rose like iron trees. The gates shook from the first strike by midday. But Riverrun was old and her walls were thick. Jon moved through the keep like a soldier, not a king. He helped carry barrels of pitch. He held wounded men's hands as they bled out. He fought on the walls with a borrowed axe when the gate was breached on the second night. He fought well, but he was bleeding inside. For every Lannister soldier that fell, 10 more rose behind him. On the third night, the eastern wall cracked. On the fourth, the grain stores were fired by a lucky shot of flaming pitch. The people inside began to starve. And then, on the fifth night, they came. Not the Lannisters. The North. Robb Stark rode through the night with an army of 5,000. He came not with songs or ceremony, but with fury in his bones. His scouts had picked up the movement of Tywin's army and marched double time to meet it. They had no war horns, no banners until they were within striking distance. They attacked at dawn. The camp of House Lannister lit up like a struck oil lamp, and suddenly everything changed. From atop Riverrun's walls, Jon watched the chaos. The lions roared, but they were bleeding now. The wolves had arrived, and their teeth were sharp. Robb didn't come to parley. He came to fight. The two sides clashed by the riverbanks, steel on steel, man against man. Jon couldn't wait. He gathered the remaining fighters in the keep, Tully, guards, Northmen, his few loyal knights, and led a breakout charge into the Lannister flank. It was madness. But it worked. The two Stark brothers met in the middle of the chaos, blades dripping, surrounded by smoke and ruin. Jon didn't speak. Robb didn't either. They just looked at each other, older than their years, too much broken behind their eyes. Then Jon said it. "Thank you." Robb's reply came as a whisper. "Let's finish it." And together, they did. By nightfall, Tywin had pulled back. Not broken, not defeated, but wounded. Riverrun stood, barely. Inside the keep, the dead were counted. The wounded were stacked. In rows. Fires burned the corpses. The river ran red. Robb sat beside Jon, both too exhausted to speak. "You're really a Targaryen?" Robb asked after a while. Jon nodded. Robb snorted. "And I'm a bloody unicorn." But then he stood, looked at his brother, and knelt. "The North will follow its king," he said, "even if his name is Aegon." John stared at him, throat tightening. I never wanted your kneel. You didn't ask for any of this, Robb said, but you have it now, so don't waste it. And in the cold hours before dawn, with the fires still smoldering, a raven flew from Riverrun bearing a message for King's Landing. The king has held the Riverlands. But far to the north, past the wall, the real war was waking. The dead marched, and they did not kneel. The wall stood silent as ever, tall, ancient, watching. But something had changed. Beneath its frozen shadow, at Castle Black, the Night's Watch, burned bodies day and night. Men who had once worn black now clawed at gates with dead hands. The White Walkers had come again, and their army no longer crept. It marched. No one in the South cared. Not yet. They were too busy bleeding each other dry for thrones and crowns, too drunk on their petty wars to notice winter had finally kept its promise. But word did travel. And it reached King's Landing through one ragged rider and a half-dead horse, collapsing in the courtyard, screaming 2 words before he passed. They're coming. John listened in silence as Maester Lewin read the letter recovered from the man's satchel, signed by Lord Commander Jeor Mormont. Words scratched in desperation, the parchment torn, stained with blood and frost. We hold no longer. They have risen in numbers we did not believe possible. The wall will fall, and when it does, the world burns. The true enemy is here, Aegon, son of Rhaegar. If the blood of the dragon runs in your veins, let it burn for the living. John didn't speak for a long time. He stood in the solar, hands pressed to the window, the iron throne behind him like a dark shadow clawing at his back. It's always been them, he whispered. Not the Lannisters, not the throne. The dead. Ned entered quietly. They'll never follow you north, he said. You ride there, you ride alone. John turned to him. Then so be it. But it wasn't that simple. The council, what little there was left of it, exploded in outrage when John declared his intention to ride to the wall. You leave now, and the lions will strike again, warned Lord Royce. We only just held Riverrun. Tywin will see your absence as weakness. I don't care what Tywin sees, John snapped. The dead don't play politics. Catelyn, newly arrived from Riverrun, stared at him with tired eyes. You'll die. Then I'll die on the right side of the wall. But something changed. It was Sansa, quiet for days, who finally stood and said, Then we go with you. Eyes turned. Robb nodded slowly. The North remembers, and it stands for the living. Davos smirked. I never liked the cold, but I hate bloody corpses more. Even Ned, hesitant, eventually relented. I'll stay, he said. Someone must hold the throne while the king fights for the realm. And so, for the first time in centuries, the king rode north. John did not ride as a dragon, nor as a Stark. He rode as both, and the men who followed him wore many cloaks. Northern, gray, Riverland blue, Vale steel, but they followed one banner, a dire wolf wrapped in a dragon's flame. The march north was not glorious. It was quiet, slow, haunting. Villages were abandoned, crops rotted in the field. Tracks in the snow revealed more than deer and wolves. Dead things moved in the trees. By the time they reached Castle Black, the sky had turned the color of ash. Jeor Mormont greeted them at the gates, his beard longer, his eyes sunken, his voice a growl. You came, he said, surprised. John dismounted. You called. Mormont gestured to the wall. Then look, see what waits beyond. They climbed to the top. John stood there, wind howling through his cloak as his eyes settled on the far horizon. The trees were gone. Everything. Gone. Just white. And movement. Like a tide of ice, the army of the dead stretched to the horizon. Tens of thousands, maybe more. Silent. Waiting. Gods, whispered Robb beside him. John felt something stir in his chest. Not fear, not despair. resolve. He turned to Mormont. How long until they reach the wall? Days, maybe less. Jon looked to the east. Then we don't wait here. You mean to ride out? Mormont asked, shocked. That's suicide. Jon nodded. Maybe. But every man we kill before the wall stands buys us time, buys them time. He gestured behind him. The realm. That night, under the dark sky, Jon stood before his army. He did not speak of glory. He did not speak of kings. He said only this: they are death. And we are the last wall between them and everything. If we fall, the world falls. So we fight, not for crowns, not for thrones, for life. Then he drew his sword, Longclaw, and led them beyond the wall, into the snow, into the dark. Snow fell like ashes, heavy, endless, blinding. Jon led his force beyond the wall under a sky so gray it could have been carved from stone. No sunlight, no stars, just that smothering cold, like the breath of the dead pressing against your throat. Every footstep crunched with the weight of finality. They moved in silence. Even the horses had stopped whinnying days ago, as if they too knew that something unnatural waited ahead. Robb rode beside him, face hidden beneath his cloak, hands frozen but steady on his reins. Behind them came the rest. Night's Watch Rangers, Northern warriors, wildling scouts who had bent the knee only after Jon promised them something better than death. Every man carried dragonglass weapons or steel dipped in fire oil. Not enough. It would never be enough. By the 5th day, they found the first village, or what remained, a ring of burned homes. Blood frozen in red-black trails across the snow. No bodies, no animals, just silence and death. But not even crows dared feast here. Jon ordered the men to keep moving. No fires that night. Just watch. Rotations and prayers to gods that no longer answered. The enemy came the next morning. No sound, no warning, just eyes, dozens, hundreds, burning blue in the fog. They moved like shadows, fast, brutal, inhuman. Dead men with frozen flesh and eyes hollow as the grave. The first to fall was a wildling boy. He screamed as a blade of ice tore through his throat. His blood hit the snow and hissed. By the time anyone reached him, his eyes were already turning blue. Jon was the first to charge. Longclaw cleaved through 2 whites before the rest followed. Robb fought beside him, roaring like Grey Wind himself, his sword coated in black flame. Sir Barristan led the rear guard, keeping the flanks from collapsing. It wasn't a battle. It was a test, a taste. By the time the undead pulled back, 20 men were dead. 6 more were wounded and begging for fire. But they lived. Barely. As Jon stood over the fire that night, burning the remains of his fallen, Robb approached, blood on his cheek and weariness in his eyes. "This isn't war," he said. "It's slaughter." Jon nodded. "This is what waits for the rest of the world." Robb looked at him then, really looked at him. "You're different. I've seen what's coming." "No," Robb said. "I mean, you carry it different, like it's already too late." Jon didn't answer, because he wasn't sure it wasn't. That night Jon dreamed. He stood alone before the wall, sword in hand, as the dead poured over it like ants. King's Landing burned in the distance. The Iron Throne sat empty. Arya screamed his name. Sansa bled on a pile of snow. Ned knelt in chains. And behind it all, on a horse made of bone and frost, stood the Night King. He raised his hand. Jon's heart stopped. Then he woke to screams. The camp was under attack again, but this time it wasn't just whites. It was them. White walkers, tall, pale, ice-forged armor that shimmered like shattered mirrors. They moved with grace, like death dancing. One struck Ser Barristan through the chest before the old knight even raised his shield. Jon screamed his name, cut, down a white, and reached him just in time to catch his sword as he fell. Barristan's last words were a whisper. "Don't let them win." Jon turned and met the White Walker in battle. It was unlike anything he had ever faced. Faster than human, stronger. Cold radiated from it, chilling Jon's bones with every clash. But Longclaw sang. Valyrian steel met ice blade in a shower of sparks. They danced across the frost, blood freezing as it hit the air. Then, with a roar, Jon drove Longclaw through the thing's chest. It shattered like glass. Silence. Fell again. But it was not a victory. Sir Barristan was dead. So were 20 more, and the night was only growing colder. Jon looked out into the darkness, heart pounding, blade shaking in his hand. He knew now. This wasn't a battle they could win with swords alone. They needed fire, and they needed it now. Smoke rose from the pyres, curling into the gray skies, like black veins against the snow. Jon stood among the dead with ash on his cheeks, Sir Barristan's sword in one hand, Longclaw in the other. He hadn't spoken since the fire was lit. There was nothing left to say. They had ridden beyond the wall to hold the line. Now they were just trying to survive it. Less than half the men remained. Most were wounded, all were exhausted, and the White Walkers were still out there, waiting, watching. The forest beyond the frozen ridge hadn't moved in a full day, yet every man knew it wasn't empty. Jon turned to Robb as the flames died low. His brother had aged 10 years in 10 days. His shoulder was bandaged, his face streaked with dried blood, but his eyes, they were still stark. "We can't stay," Jon said. "Not here. Not anymore." Robb nodded. "The wall?" Jon shook his head. "We go south, fast." Robb frowned. "You mean to run?" "No," Jon said. "I mean to end this." He gathered the remaining officers that night. Robb, Tormund Giantsbane, Lord Royce, a few watch commanders still breathing. Around the fire, Jon laid out a plan that felt more like a prayer than a strategy. "We ride south and take word to every lord, every kingdom. We show them what we've seen. We bring the war to the living, because if we wait, it'll come for them." "You think they'll listen?" Tormund spat. "These lords and ladies feasting in castles while the dead tear through the woods. You think they'll lift a finger?" Jon met his eyes. "They'll listen, or they'll burn." He sent riders ahead with proof, severed hands that still twitched, shards of ice-blade weapons, bones that refused to rot. He sent messages to Dragonstone, to the Reach, to Dorne, and to Winterfell. It was time the realm knew who their king truly was. They arrived at the wall 5 days later. What was left of it? A section of the East Watch Gate lay in ruins. The smell of burning pitch and flesh lingered in the air, and above them, blackened ice stretched up into the sky like the ribs of some dead god. They had attacked, not just the Whites, the Night King. Jon stood before the shattered section in stunned silence. He touched the broken gate, still warm from fire. His breath caught in his throat. They had killed it. The wall had fallen. "The world doesn't know it yet," Jon said, "but the dead are already here." Robb walked to his side. "What now?" Jon looked south, toward a world too busy fighting over thrones to realize they were burning. "Now," he said, "Stop pretending I'm a king." Robb blinked. "What?" "I'm not here to rule," Jon said. "Not anymore. I'm not Rhaegar. I'm not a Targaryen. I'm not even a Stark." Robb started to protest, but Jon held up a hand. "I'm something else, something worse. A sword with a crown. A name meant to bleed." He turned to the others. "If the realm won't listen to a king, maybe it'll listen to a threat." It didn't take long. Jon marched south with the shattered remnants of his army and the dead at his back. He didn't hide it. He brought white prisoners in chains, dragged behind horses like rotten trophies. He entered every hold-fast with silence and flame, setting undead before lords who'd once called the war in the north a fable. Some fainted. Some wept. Some swore allegiance on the spot. Others tried to fight him. They burned. By the time Jon reached Harrenhal, he had an army behind him, and a reputation that turned stronger than any banner. The king who rode with the dead, the dragon wolf, the crownless flame. From Old Town to White Harbor, the realm started to shift. The Lannisters, weakened from the Riverland's defeat, went quiet. Tywin knew something worse was coming. His scouts had already vanished near the neck. Even Cersei, still prisoner in King's Landing under Ned's watch, began to see it. One night, Ned came to her cell. "They're real," he said. Cersei laughed bitterly. "Then burn them all." "That's what kings do, isn't it?" "No," Ned said. "It's what monsters do." And then, one cold morning, Jon stood before the Iron Throne. He did not sit. He stared at it as wildfire torches burned around the hall. Arya was there, Robb, Sansa, even Daenerys, who had returned from exile in the east after seeing one of Jon's ravens, flanked by 2 dragons and a silence that carried more fear than fury. Jon turned to them. "To win this war, we do not need one crown," he said. "We need all of them." And in front of the Iron Throne, Jon Snow, the bastard who wasn't, the prince who never wanted it, melted it with dragon fire. He raised Longclaw and nodded to Daenerys, who whispered to her dragon in High Valyrian. Flames filled the throne room. The Iron Throne, Aegon's legacy, the heart of every war since, melted into a pool of twisted steel. "Let it end here," Jon said. "No more kings, no more thrones, only the living or the dead." Behind him, the war horns sounded. The dead were at the gates, and this time the realm stood together, for once, for all.